Keanu Reeves stood backstage, his hands trembling slightly as he held the small piece of paper. It was a simple piece of paper, yet the words scribbled on it weighed heavier than anything he had carried before. The theater was packed that evening. People had come expecting to hear him talk about movies, fame, or maybe the secrets behind his humble life. But tonight, Keanu had decided to share something he had never shared before, a truth that had carried him through darkness, loneliness, and all the empty hotel rooms he had stayed in over the years. That it was raining outside, and the sound of the drops hitting the roof seemed to echo his heartbeat. A young stage assistant peeked through the curtains and whispered, "5 minutes, sir." Keanu nodded, but did not move. He looked down at his boots, the same pair he had worn on many sets, worn out but familiar. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Help me do this right." As he stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted. Flashes from phones lit up the room like 1,000 tiny stars. He raised his hand in a quiet gesture for everyone to calm down. The lights were bright on his face, but for a moment, he felt like he was standing alone under an old street lamp, just a boy searching for answers. He cleared his throat, his voice calm but carrying a hidden storm. "Thank you for being here tonight," Keanu began, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "I know you came to hear about movies, about action scenes, maybe about some gossip. But tonight, I want to talk about something real." He paused, scanning the faces in front of him, people of all ages, some leaning forward as if trying to catch every breath he took. "I want to talk about a name that many fear to say out loud, a name that some have misused, a name that changed my life forever, Jesus." The room fell so quiet that the distant rumble of thunder outside seemed louder than before. A woman in the front row gasped softly. A man shifted in his chair, uncomfortable but curious. Keanu's eyes glistened under the harsh lights. He spoke slowly, like a man tracing his scars with trembling fingers. "Years ago, I was lost. I had money, I had fame, but my soul was empty. I would sit alone in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling, asking myself why I was still alive. I drank too much, I thought too much, I trusted too little." His hand shook as he unfolded the paper, but then he dropped it, letting it float down to the stage floor. "I don't need this," he said softly. He looked up, straight into the eyes of a teenage boy in the second row who had come with his mother. The boy's eyes were wide, maybe seeing Keanu not as a star, but as a man just like him, searching for something bigger than himself. "One night, I was sitting on a park bench," Keanu continued, his voice cracking a little. "It was cold, and I was alone. A homeless man came up to me. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for food. He sat down next to me and said, 'You look like you're carrying the world on your back. You know, you don't have to.'" Keanu let out a breathy laugh, a sad one that held years of pain. I asked him what he meant, and he told me about Jesus. Not the Jesus on a painting or the Jesus people fight about. The Jesus who sits next to you on a cold bench when you're ready to give up. Someone in the audience wiped their eyes. A couple sitting in the back held hands a little tighter. Keanu stepped forward, closer to the edge of the stage, as if trying to shorten the distance between him and every broken heart in that room. "I don't expect you to believe because I say it," he said. "I just want you to know that if you're lost, if you're hurting, you're not alone. I learned that faith is not about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about knowing that when you fall, someone is there to lift you up, not to judge you but to hold you until you can stand again." A low rumble of thunder rolled over the building, as if the heavens themselves were leaning in to listen. Keanu's knees felt weak, but he pressed on. He could feel something pressing on his chest, not fear, not regret, but something bigger. He knew he had to keep going. "I'm not a preacher," he said, a small smile breaking through his tears. "I'm just a man who's made more mistakes than I can count. But every time I fell, every time I thought I couldn't breathe anymore, there was a whisper. Sometimes it came through a stranger, sometimes through a sunset, sometimes through the silence in my room. And the whisper said, 'You are loved.'" He looked up at the ceiling, blinking away the blur in his eyes. He raised his hands slightly, as if feeling an invisible warmth pouring down on him. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this tonight," he said, his voice softer than ever. "Maybe someone here needed to hear it. Maybe someone came here tonight not to see me, but to see hope. If that's you, I want you to know that hope is real, that love is real, that Jesus is real." The words slipped from his lips like water pouring from a broken dam. His legs trembled, and before he could catch himself, his knees buckled. Gasps filled the theater as Keanu Reeves fell to the ground. His arms spread out as if he was surrendering. Everything he carried all these years, the lights above seemed brighter, and for a moment, it felt like he wasn't lying on a stage, but resting in the arms of something greater than himself. Silence filled the hall. No one moved, no one spoke. They just watched, as a man they knew as a hero on screen showed them what true surrender looked like in real life. And somewhere in that silence, hearts that had been locked tight began to crack open, just a little, just enough for hope to slip in. Keanu Reeves lay on the stage floor, his chest rising and falling slowly. The spotlights above him cast a soft glow that made him look almost weightless, as if he had fallen not in shame but in freedom. The audience sat frozen, eyes wide, hands clasped together, unsure if they should stand, clap, or run to him. But in that moment, no one moved, because deep down, they felt that something sacred was happening right in front of them. Behind the thick velvet curtains, the stage manager panicked. She spoke into her headset, whispering, "Should we get help? He's down. Should we get him off the stage?" But her words felt out of place, too loud, too logical for what was unfolding. A young usher, not more than 19, stood at the edge of the curtain, eyes brimming with tears. He had grown up without a father, and tonight, the words from a man he'd only known through movies felt like a father's gentle hand on his shoulder. Slowly, Keanu moved. His eyes fluttered open, soft and dazed, as if he had woken up from a dream that still lingered in the room. He pushed himself up to his knees, his palms pressed against the cold wooden floor. He didn't care about the cameras clicking or the whispers echoing through the seats. He looked small, fragile even, but in that smallness, there was a strength that no action movie could ever capture. "I'm okay," he said, his voice hoarse but calm. "Don't worry about me." He sat back on his heels, his eyes sweeping across the audience, locking eyes with strangers who suddenly felt less like strangers and more like family. A young woman in the third row stood up. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "Keanu, I've been struggling with faith, with believing. I lost my mom 2 months ago. I keep asking why. I don't know how to trust anymore." Her words cracked mid-sentence, and she covered her mouth as tears fell freely. Keanu nodded, his eyes kind and understanding. "I know that pain," he said softly. "I lost people too. People I loved more than myself. Sometimes I still ask, why? But every time I look for answers, I find love instead. Sometimes that's all we get, love in the middle of pain." The woman sat down, her shoulders shaking as the person next to her wrapped an arm around her. The room felt warmer somehow, the air thick with honesty, the kind that makes people shift uncomfortably because it peels away their masks. Keanu slowly stood up. His knees wobbled but held strong. He walked closer to the edge of the stage, his steps slow but certain. "I want you all to understand something," he said. "I'm not perfect. I don't stand here as a saint or a hero. I stand here as a broken man who found something bigger than his brokenness." He paused, looking around the hall. The storm outside had calmed, leaving only the gentle patter of rain on the roof. "I remember one night, years after that homeless man told me about Jesus," he continued. "I was shooting a movie overseas. My body was there, but my heart was somewhere else. I felt so empty, so tired. One night, I went for a walk. I found a small church. The doors were locked, but I sat on the steps outside. I cried like a child. I asked, 'Are you really there, or am I just talking to myself?'" He wiped a tear from his cheek with the back of his hand. And you know what I heard? Nothing. No loud voice, no miracle lights, just silence. But in that silence, I felt a peace I can't explain, like someone was sitting next to me, not to fix me, but to just be there. In the front row, An older man with a rugged face and tired eyes leaned forward, tears shining in his wrinkles. His grandson beside him squeezed his hand tight. For a moment, the theater didn't feel like a place for entertainment. It felt like a living room where wounded souls gathered to remind each other they weren't alone. Keanu placed his hand over his heart. "Sometimes faith is not about getting what you want," he said, his voice growing stronger. "It's about being okay even when you don't. It's about trusting that there is love bigger than your pain, bigger than your questions, bigger than your fear." From the back, a young man in a black hoodie stood up. He raised his hand like a child in school. Keanu smiled gently and nodded at him to speak. The young man's voice trembled. "Keanu, what if I've done terrible things? What if I'm too far gone?" Keanu's eyes softened, and he stepped even closer, almost reaching out to touch him. "I've done things I regret to," he said honestly. "But I learned that grace is not about what you did. It's about what you're willing to let go of. I promise you, you're not too far gone. If you're still breathing, there's still hope. There's still time." The young man lowered his head, tears dripping onto his sneakers. People around him placed their hands on his shoulders, strangers becoming brothers in an instant. Keanu stood there, silent, letting the moment sink in like rain soaking into dry ground. He closed his eyes, took another deep breath, and said, "Maybe tonight is not about me. Maybe it's about you. Maybe it's about all of us. Maybe we needed to remember that we're not just fans, not just faces in a crowd. We are souls. We are loved, and we're never too far gone." As his words echoed through the hall, a hush fell over the room again. People felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Something real, something soft yet unbreakable. They didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just sat there, letting tears wash away old fears, letting hope take root in places they had forgotten. Keanu looked up at the ceiling one more time. In his mind, he whispered a thank you, not for himself, but for the broken hearts that might leave tonight feeling just a little less alone. Keanu Reeves stood there for a long time, the stage lights warm on his face, his eyes searching the audience as if he could see each person's hidden wounds. Slowly, he stepped back from the edge of the stage and sank down on the steps that led into the crowd. He didn't want to stand above them anymore. He wanted to sit among them, just a man in a room full of other broken people trying to find hope. The young usher who had been watching from behind the curtain finally stepped out. He walked over, nervous but determined, and sat on the steps next to Keanu. His hands fidgeted in his lap. "Sir, can I ask you something?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Keanu turned his head, giving him his full attention, like there was no one else in the theater. "Of course," Keanu said gently. "What's your name, Mason?" the boy replied, his eyes flicking down. I used to go to church with my mom before she passed. After she died, I stopped believing. I couldn't understand why God would take her. Tonight, when you said you sat on church steps crying, I felt like that was me." Keanu placed a comforting hand on Mason's shoulder. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said, his words simple but heavy with truth. "It's okay to ask why. It's okay to be angry. Faith isn't about pretending you're okay when you're not. It's about trusting that somehow, even in your worst pain, love is holding you." Mason sniffled, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "Do you really think Jesus cares? I mean, I'm just me." Keanu looked at him with eyes that had seen too much but still held a spark of hope. "I don't just think it, Mason. I know it. You're not just you. You're a soul worth everything. If you were the only one left, he would still come for you." Those words sank into Mason's heart like rain soaking through dry soil. He let out a shaky breath, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel so alone in his questions. Meanwhile, people in the audience began to murmur softly to each other. Some shared their own stories in hushed voices, realizing they weren't the only ones who felt lost. An older woman, her hair tied back in a neat bun, turned to the man next to her and whispered, "I haven't prayed in years, but maybe tonight, maybe I'll try again." Keanu stood up, helping Mason to his feet. "You're not alone," he said. "None of you are." He stepped back onto the stage and looked at the crowd, his heart beating slower now, each word pouring out from a place deeper than he had ever shared before. "When I first started acting," he said, pacing slowly, "I thought fame would fix me. I thought if enough people loved me, the emptiness would disappear. But no matter how many cameras flashed, no matter how many autographs I signed, I would come home to silence. I'd sit with the awards and the money and the scripts, and I'd still feel like I didn't matter." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. Some of you feel that way right now. Maybe you've got success, maybe you've got family, maybe you've got nothing at all. But inside, you feel like a hollow shell, pretending to be whole. I want you to know that you don't have to pretend anymore. A woman in the back raised her hand timidly. "But what if people judge me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they laugh at me for believing?" Keanu smiled softly, his eyes kind but firm. "Let them laugh. Let them talk. The truth is, people will judge you no matter what you believe. They'll judge you for failing. They'll judge you for trying. They'll judge you for loving. They'll judge you for hating. So choose the truth that heals you, not the lie that pleases them." His words washed over the room like a gentle tide. Some people wept openly now, wiping their eyes with tissues they had pulled from bags and pockets. A father pulled his teenage daughter into his arms, whispering something only they could hear. Keanu walked to the side of the stage where a small wooden cross stood, part of the backdrop for a play that had finished weeks ago, but had never been taken down. He reached out and traced the edge of it with his fingers, feeling the roughness of the wood. "The symbol," he said, turning back to the audience, "is not about religion. It's about love that doesn't run when you're ugly. Love that stays when everyone else walks away. Love that says, you're enough, even when you feel worthless." The young man in the black hoodie, who had spoken earlier, stepped forward from his seat. He climbed onto the stage, shaky but determined. He stood next to Keanu, eyes red, voice raw. I want that. I want to believe again. I don't know how, but I want to." Keanu put an arm around his shoulder. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," he said. "Faith is not a formula. It's a journey. Just take one step. The rest will come." Someone from the back called out, "Can you pray with us?" The question floated through the air like a fragile balloon, delicate, but impossible to ignore. Keanu's eyes widened. He wasn't a pastor. He wasn't a preacher. He was just a man. But something in him said yes. He knelt down on the stage floor again, this time by choice, and motioned for anyone who wanted to join him. People stood, stepped out of their rows, and slowly made their way down the aisles. Some knelt in the aisles, others at their seats, tears falling freely onto the carpet. Mason stood near Keanu, his hands folded tightly, his lips whispering silent words. Keanu closed his eyes and said, "Jesus, we're here. We're broken. We're messy. We're not perfect. But we're yours. Please remind every heart here tonight that they are loved, that they are not alone, that they matter. Fill every empty space with your peace. Thank you for not giving up on us." A hush fell over the theater as people breathed out the pain they had been holding for years. No bright lights, no special effects, just raw hearts, real tears, and a hope that felt like sunlight breaking through the clouds. Keanu opened his eyes, his cheeks wet with his own tears. He looked out at the sea of faces, faces that now carried the soft glow of people who had been reminded they were loved, just as they were. And in that moment, he knew this was bigger than any movie he had ever made. This was real. This was faith. This was family. Keanu Reeves stayed kneeling on the stage floor long after his quiet prayer ended. Round him, people were still kneeling too, some with heads bowed low, some with faces lifted up, eyes closed, mouths whispering things they had never dared to say out loud. You could feel the heaviness lifting off the room, like someone had opened a window in a dusty old house and let fresh air in for the first time in years. The young usher, Mason, stayed close by. He didn't know what to do except stand there, with his hand resting on Keanu's shoulder. He felt like he was holding up not just a man, but a piece of hope for everyone in that hall. And maybe, just maybe, he was. Slowly, one by one, people started to rise. Some held hands with people they had never met before. An elderly couple clutched each other as they walked back to their seats. A mother held her sleeping child, pressing a kiss to his forehead as if to remind herself that tonight was more than A show. It was a new start. Keanu stood up, wiping his face with the back of his hand. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes red but calm. He felt empty, but in the best possible way, as if he had poured out everything he'd been carrying for so long, and found that there was still something good left inside. He raised his hand slightly and said, "Thank you for staying with me tonight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being brave enough to open your hearts." His voice cracked, but he didn't hide it. He let them see every part of him, the famous man, the broken man, the man who believed. From the back of the hall, a man's voice rose up. "Keanu, how do we keep this feeling? How do we not lose it tomorrow?" His question wasn't angry. It was desperate. The kind of question that comes from someone who's tasted hope, but is scared of losing it once the lights go out. Keanu walked back to the center of the stage and sat down cross-legged like a boy in a circle at camp. "I wish I could tell you that once you find faith, it stays simple," he said. "But the truth is, you'll wake up tomorrow and life will still be life. The storms will come back. The doubts will creep in. People might laugh at you, might tell you it was all emotion." He paused and looked around, making sure every pair of eyes was locked with his. "But remember this, faith is not a feeling you chase, it's a choice you make every day. When you wake up, choose to believe again. When you fall, choose to get back up. When you're angry, choose to talk to him anyway. Faith is a relationship. It grows when you stay real." The man nodded, tears rolling down his face as he sat back down, hugging his wife tight. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the simple closeness of it reminding everyone around them that sometimes love speaks loudest. Without saying a word, a young girl, probably not older than 15, raised her hand from the middle rows. Her voice shook as she called out, "Keanu, can you tell us how you stay strong? How do you not give up?" Keanu chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Who says I don't?" He said honestly, "I do give up sometimes. I break down. I lose my way. But every time I do, I remember one thing. I'm not holding onto faith alone. Faith is holding onto me. When I'm too weak to stand, he stands for me. When I'm too tired to pray, he listens to the tears in my pillow." Strength doesn't mean you never fall. It means you never fall alone. The girl nodded, her mother pulling her into an embrace. The entire theater felt like a family room now. Walls of strangers had melted, and what was left was a gathering of broken people finding pieces of each other's strength. Keanu shifted, crossing his arms over his knees. "I want to tell you something I've never said in public," he said. His voice was softer now, as if he was letting them in on a secret he'd hidden for decades. "When my sister got sick, I prayed every night for her to be healed. Every single night. When she passed, I thought maybe faith didn't work. I was angry. I didn't open a Bible for years. I ran from churches. I blamed God for my pain." You could hear people in the front rows sniffing, hands moving to their mouths to cover quiet sobs. Keanu looked down at his hands, his thumbs tracing invisible scars on his palms. "But years later, I realized something," he said. "Faith is not about getting everything you want. It's about trusting him even when you don't understand. My sister didn't get healed here, but she's not hurting anymore. And somehow, in the middle of that heartbreak, I found him again, not because he gave me what I wanted, but because he never let go of me." A hush fell again. People breathed slower. The walls inside them cracked a little more, letting warmth in where there had only been cold. Keanu stood up and moved toward the young man in the hoodie, the one who had asked about being too far gone. He pulled him into a hug, and the young man clung to him like a child holding onto a father he never had. "This is what faith looks like," Keanu said as they broke apart. "Not perfect, not polished, just real, messy, honest. It's you. It's me. It's all of us, held together by a love that doesn't let go." An older man with a cane struggled to his feet in the back. People helped him up so he could speak. "Keanu," he croaked, his voice weak but determined, "will you come back? Will you keep doing this? People need to hear this. They need to know hope is real." Keanu's eyes filled with fresh tears. "If I'm breathing, I'll keep telling it," he said, his voice steady even as his lips trembled. "I'll keep telling it until my last day, and when I can't speak anymore, I hope my life will still whisper it to whoever needs to hear. Mason stepped forward, standing next to Keanu again, his eyes shining with a new kind of courage. We'll keep telling it to, he said, his voice strong now, all of us. Keanu looked around the theater one last time that night, taking in every face, every tear-streaked cheek, every pair of eyes that now held a tiny spark of something, more than they had when they first walked in. We're family now, he said, smiling through his tears. And family doesn't give up on each other, ever. In that moment, the storm outside had stopped completely. The world felt quiet, as if it, too, was holding its breath. The lights dimmed softly, and the crowd sat in silence, not wanting to move, not wanting to let go of what they had found in that room. A truth that felt more real than anything they had ever known. And somewhere deep in Keanu's heart, he knew this was only the beginning. The theater lights stayed dim, but the warmth inside those walls only grew stronger. People lingered in their seats, not wanting to stand up yet, as if moving would break something fragile that had formed between them. Keanu Reeves sat back down on the edge of the stage, his legs dangling over the side like a boy who had nowhere else to be. He didn't want to be the star tonight. He just wanted to stay here, in this bubble of truth that felt more honest than any movie set ever had. Mason, the young usher, sat cross-legged beside him, staring out at the people who were quietly talking in pairs and small groups. Some people prayed together, heads bowed close. Others just held hands in silence. Keanu watched it all, his heart full yet aching at the same time. He thought about how many people in this room would go back to their old lives tonight, to empty apartments, broken marriages, addictions that wouldn't disappear overnight. But he also knew they wouldn't go back the same way they came in. Something had shifted. A small voice broke through the hum of quiet conversations. It came from a boy who looked no older than 12. He stood near the front row, his hands stuffed deep into the pockets of his oversized hoodie. His hair was messy, and his shoes looked 2 sizes too big. "Mr. Keanu," the boy said softly. Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees so he could hear him better. "What's your name?" "Buddy," Keanu asked, his voice so gentle it made the boy's eyes brighten just a little. "Liam," he said. He kicked at the floor, trying to be brave. "Can I ask you something? Do you think Jesus really cares about kids like me? My dad says he doesn't care. He says nobody does." Keanu's chest tightened. He hated that feeling, the helpless ache that came whenever he saw a child carrying weight meant for grown-ups. He beckoned Liam closer. The boy stepped forward, shy but hungry for an answer that might heal something deep inside. Keanu reached out and rested his hand on Liam's shoulder. "Liam, look at me," he said. The boy lifted his head, his eyes wide and searching. "I need you to hear this, okay? Jesus cares about you more than you will ever know. People may walk away, people may hurt you, but he will never stop loving you. Not for 1 second. You're not invisible to him." Liam's bottom lip trembled. He blinked fast, fighting tears. Keanu pulled him into a hug, Liam's small arms wrapped around his neck so tightly that Keanu felt the boy's heartbeat against his own chest. "You're gonna be okay, Liam," Keanu whispered into his hair. "You're not alone. You've got family now. All of us." Mason watched them, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Behind them, others were watching too, and some people quietly started pulling little folded papers from their pockets. Notes they'd written during Keanu's talk, scribbled prayers and secret hopes they hadn't told anyone. A young woman stood up with her paper in hand. She stepped forward and laid it on the edge of the stage. Someone else followed. Soon, dozens of people were bringing their notes forward, setting them down gently like fragile pieces of themselves they were finally brave enough to let go of. Keanu looked at the pile growing at his feet. Each note felt like a life, a broken piece of someone's heart. He didn't want to step on them or sweep them away. Instead, he knelt and gathered them in his hands, holding them close to his chest. "These don't stay here," he said, his voice echoing softly. "He hears every word, every tear, every hope." In the back of the theater, a man who had slipped in late sat hunched over, his hands pressed to his face. He was well-dressed, a sharp suit and shiny shoes, but his eyes were red and his shoulders shook with quiet sobs. He had come straight from a business meeting he'd been pretending to care about. He had everything on paper, a big house, an expensive car, but tonight he realized how empty it all was when the crowd noticed him crying. No one stared or whispered. Instead, an older woman walked over and sat beside him. She didn't ask him to talk. She didn't ask him to explain. She just sat there, placing a gentle hand on his back. Sometimes love doesn't need words. Keanu felt a deep tug in his heart. He stood up again, the notes still pressed to his chest. This is what church looks like, he said. It's not walls or fancy words. It's people who are willing to carry each other when they can't walk alone. It's strangers becoming family. Mason stepped forward. His voice shook but carried through the quiet. Can we do this again? Not just tonight, but always? Keanu smiled at him, pride and hope mixing in his eyes. Yes, we can, he said. But it doesn't have to be me standing here, it's you. It's all of you. When you see someone hurting, sit with them. When you see someone lost, remind them they're loved. You don't need a stage to speak hope. You just need a heart that's willing. Someone near the front whispered, but how do we know he's real, Keanu? How do we know we're not just lying to ourselves to feel better? Keanu nodded, respecting the question. That's fair, he said. I asked that too. I still ask sometimes. But you know what I learned? Faith is not blind. It's not pretending. It's looking at the darkest parts of your life and still believing light is possible. It's finding a peace you can't explain, a strength you know didn't come from you. It's seeing love show up where it shouldn't. And when you feel it, even for a moment, you'll know it's real because you'll never be the same again. He looked out at the people who now felt more like his own flesh and blood than fans. He saw Liam sitting in the front row now, holding Mason's hand. He saw the businessman who had finally stopped crying, now leaning his head on the old woman's shoulder like a lost son who had found his mother again. He saw the scribbled prayers piled at his feet, each one a testament that people still dared to hope. And in that simple, sacred moment, Keanu felt a wave of peace wash over him. He didn't know what would come tomorrow. The news would probably twist this night into something strange. People might laugh. Critics might mock him. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that souls had been reminded of something. They had forgotten. They were never alone. He breathed out slowly, his voice low but steady. When you leave tonight, don't take just my words. Take this truth. You are loved. You are seen. And you don't have to carry your burden alone anymore. The lights in the theater dimmed a little more, but the light inside the people burned brighter than ever before. The storm outside was long gone now, replaced by a gentle breeze that rustled through the streets as if the whole world was exhaling a sigh of relief. Keanu stepped down from the stage and into the aisle, ready to walk out with them, not as a star above them, but as a brother beside them. The theater doors creaked open slowly, letting in the cool night air. One by one, people stepped out, blinking under the streetlights as if waking from a long sleep. They didn't rush for their cars or grab their phones to post about the night. Instead, they lingered on the sidewalk, talking softly, hugging strangers who felt like family now. The world outside hadn't changed. The traffic lights still blinked. The rainwater still glistened in the gutters. But something inside each of them had shifted forever. Keanu Reeves stood near the exit, his hands buried in the pockets of his worn-out coat. He watched people leave with eyes that saw more than faces. He saw stories, prayers, second chances. Mason stayed by his side, yawning but refusing to go home yet. The boy Liam stood a few feet away, his small hand wrapped tightly around the old businessman's fingers. The man who'd cried alone in the back row now smiling down at the boy like he'd found a lost piece of his own heart. Mason nudged Keanu gently. Do you think they'll remember? He asked, his voice tired but hopeful. Keanu looked at him, the corners of his mouth curling into a soft smile. Maybe not every word, he said, but they'll remember how it felt. And sometimes that's enough. He turned to see a young woman waiting shyly by the door. She held a tiny notebook pressed to her chest. When Keanu met her eyes, she stepped forward. Can I tell you something? She asked, her voice shaking. Of course, Keanu said, giving her his full attention. I was gonna end my life tonight, she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. I bought a ticket because I wanted to see you one last time. I thought maybe your movies could distract me for a bit. But you didn't talk about movies tonight. You talked about hope, about Jesus. And now, I'm not going home to die. I'm going home to try again. Keanu's throat tightened. He reached out and took her hand in both of his. I'm so glad you're staying, he said softly, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. You matter so much, don't forget that, okay? She nodded, her face crumpling into a fragile smile before she turned and melted into the small crowd gathered on the sidewalk. Mason wiped his eyes with his sleeve, whispering, "This is real, isn't it? This is what real faith looks like." Keanu rested a hand on Mason's shoulder. Yeah, it's not about buildings or stages. It's about hearts. It's about staying. When it's hard, it's about showing up for each other. Just then, an older couple approached, the woman holding a single white rose. We wanted you to have this, she said. It's nothing fancy. It's just to say thank you for reminding us that love is still real. We lost our son years ago. Tonight, it felt like we got a piece of him back. Keanu accepted the rose with a gentle nod. He pressed it to his chest, feeling its soft petals against his skin like a promise that even the most fragile things could be beautiful again. Behind him, the stage manager peeked out from the doors, her eyes red but her lips curved into a warm smile. We'll keep the lights on for as long as you need, she called out. But Keanu shook his head. No, he said, turning to face her. Turn them off. They don't need the lights anymore. They have each other now. As the last few people trickled out, the big doors swung shut, leaving the theater dark and quiet again. Keanu stepped onto the empty sidewalk, the soles of his boots splashing through shallow puddles. The night sky above was clear now, the clouds long gone, the stars sharp and bright as if watching over every soul that had walked out those doors, carrying something new inside them. Mason fell into step beside him, hands stuffed in his jacket, pockets, shoulders hunched against the breeze. Where will you go now? He asked. Keanu looked down the street where the city lights shimmered like distant promises. Anywhere people need to hear they're not alone, he said. Every place is a stage when you're telling the truth. Mason smiled at that. Do you think it really changed anything? Keanu stopped walking for a moment and turned to face him. Mason, sometimes it's not about changing the whole world in one night, he said. Sometimes it's about changing one heart. Then that heart changes another. And before you know it, love spreads further than you'll ever see. Mason nodded, his breath forming little puffs in the cool air. Will you keep doing it? Will you keep telling people? Keanu squeezed his shoulder. As long as I have breath, he promised. And when I'm gone, I hope you'll keep telling it too. Mason didn't say anything more. He didn't have to. Together, they walked down the quiet street, passing under streetlights that flickered like gentle reminders that even in the darkest places, there was always a spark waiting to be seen. Far behind them, in that old theater, the stage was empty, the curtains drawn tight. But inside the walls, if you listened closely, you could almost hear it. The echoes of whispered prayers, the rustle of scribbled notes laid down with trembling hands, the soft promise that hope never really leaves. And out on that street, two figures, one who people thought was just an actor, and one who used to think he was just an usher, disappeared into the night together, carrying a truth bigger than any spotlight could hold. Faith is real, love is real, and no one ever has to fall alone again.